Hi, fellow whiskey lovers. Welcome back to another episode of Whisky Wednesdays. My name's Daryl Lim, and I'm your host. Last week on my channel, we showcased the Macaloneys Caledonian Distillery's corporate trailer video. That gives you a preamble to what the next few weeks' episodes will be. Macaloneys Caledonian Distillery was one of two distilleries that had invited me when I was visiting Vancouver Island this summer in August. I would like to thank Lee Baker, manager of the Visitor and Guest Experience Center at Macaloneys, for personally taking me through the distillery and giving me a guided tour of its distilling process, as well as showcasing the different malts and products that they have. In today's video, you're going to see how the background of the name Macaloneys Caledonian Distillery came about. You're also going to hear a little bit about its owner, Graham Macaloney, along with the history of Lee Baker. We will also be featuring an overview of its malts and peat. Most fascinatingly, we'll be showcasing their seasonal distillation process. So let me turn it over to Lee Baker at this time. Lee, take it away. We'll start with the name.
So basically, how we came about is it's easiest to look at our name. So we're called Macaloneys Caledonian Distillery. We'll get to the beer a little bit later. But basically, our name tells us everything we need to. The first part is Caledonia. A lot of people don't know this, but where we're situated right now, before it was known as British Columbia, it was actually known as New Caledonia. So again, it has that big Scottish roots. A lot of the founding fathers who came over were Scottish, and of course they hit the East Coast first, reminded them of Scotland, so they called it New Scotland, in Latin, Nova Scotia.
Yep.
The rest of Canada is a bit flatter, not a lot like Scotland there. Prairies do not remind you of Scotland. But then you get the West Coast, and again it reminds them of Scotland, especially the island. So they called it New Caledonia. Eventually that was swallowed into British Columbia.
Right.
So the second part of our name is Macalone. And that's to do with our founder, our CEO, a guy called Graham Macalone. So Graham grew up, he's a Scotsman by birth. He grew up just outside of Glasgow in Lanarkshire. And as a young lad, he went and worked at the Black and White Whisky Factory on the bottling line. So you know, just a smaller job. And then working there, he fell in love with whiskey. And so he decided he wanted to become a whiskey maker. So he spoke to the guys there and he said, look, is there any way you can give me a job as a whiskey maker? And they were like, look, we're too small, we don't really have the time or the resources to train you up. Go away, learn the trade, come back, we might have a job for you. Well, Graham being Graham, he never goes easy way.
Right.
He always goes 3, 4, 5 steps further. So he went to study fermentation, the backbone of whiskey making, and he did that at University College London. But he didn't just learn it, he dived real deep into it. So he didn't get a degree, he didn't get a master's, he got a doctorate. So he became a PhD in fermentation sciences, as well as doing a master's in engineering. So he calls himself a fermentation engineer, which sort of doesn't exist, but he sort of crafted that role for himself. So he went back to Black and White and they said, look, Graham, you're way too overqualified. You're a PhD. We can't pay you PhD wages. So essentially, he got the same answer from everywhere, and they said, look, you're way too overqualified. So what happened was Graham essentially used his PhD and his background in engineering to go into the other world, which is fermentation, which is pharmaceuticals. So he ended up working in the field of pharmaceutical for many years and worked for some huge companies, one of them being Pfizer, huge company. And that got him over to Canada, to Alberta originally.
Right.
Where he worked in pharmaceuticals. However, he always wanted to be a whiskey maker. So essentially what happened was him and his wife decided they were going to open up their own distillery and become a Canadian whiskey factory that had Scottish roots. So the first thing they needed to do was decide where on earth it was going to be. So the first thing they looked at was climate and tourism. Now, you get a tourism obviously in Alberta, but nothing compared to Vancouver Island. And of course, it's known as New Caledonia, so it's the same climate as Scotland. It's also got that lovely sea air, which gives you that lovely brininess coming off the sea. So they decided to open up in Victoria. the first thing they needed was capital. They need a lot of money. So we got a loan from the BC government for $1.6 million, interest free. Why interest free? It's because we are a craft distillery. So everything we use in our whiskies is 100% BC grown. So again, helping the local economy. And even more recently, especially with the beers, we're doing a lot more local collaborations with Cascadia Seaweed, Bilston Creek Lavender Farm. So again, helping the local community.
And what year was that?
What year? So this was probably about 2010 when the idea started to happen.
Okay.
But we got the money, and then we also needed more because this costs a lot of money. And what happened was we also decided to open up to private investors. We call them founder owners. So our founder owners all invested from $10,000 up to another guy, I think he's at $1.8 million now. And they're all part of the clan, so they all own shares within the company. They get lots of nice perks and stuff like that. And so eventually we opened our doors in September 2016, so we're not far away from becoming 5 years old. So everything you see here was put in. Everything here is the original stuff from 2016. Again, a good example of helping the local economy is all of the cellar area over there. That is done by Spec Mech, which is again a local company here in Victoria, Specific Mechanical. The brew house is from PEI, but that's because they are the best stuff. So why do we do beer and whiskey? Well, we always wanted to do both right from the start. Basically, simple thing is, they are the same. Whiskey is just distilled, unboiled beer. I'm sure you know that.
Yep. Okay.
Worked in tourism for the last 15 years. I've worked in the liquor sector as well in the UK, but I've only been in Canada just come up for 5 years. So basically moved to the island 3 years ago, got this job and went from there.
Yeah. So are you from Scotland originally?
No. So a lot of people think I'm Scottish because of the accent. I'm from Newcastle. So very close to Scotland. So I'm a Geordie, and we're the only people, the English that the Scottish.
I spent some time in the UK, and I actually went through a British education system.
Oh, okay.
In Singapore with the GCSEs.
Oh, you did GCSEs?
A's and O's.
Nice.
So I can usually tell.
Right.
I'm like, that's more like an English northern accent.
Yeah, right. So I'm right up the top. So and I'm not even 45 minutes away from Scotland, from the border. So we're right close to each other.
Right by the sea.
Exactly. Lovely sugary sweetness. That's Gambrinus malt, again here from BC. So that's our base malt. But one thing we do here, which is really cool, something we're proud of, is we peat our own barley on site.
Really?
So yeah, one of the only distilleries in North America that do that. Normally you'd buy it, from the malting house or whatever. This is all done on site. We've got a custom-made soaker smoker up in the back. We built it ourselves.
Wow.
Basically, you can fit about three ton in there. Soak it for about 8 hours. Drain it off. Let it dry, semi-dry, so it's still a bit soft. And then we hook up a cast iron stove. And then burn peat, which we bit here for you. This one is actually, that is a bit that's already been burnt. We used to be able to burn them in here, but again, because of the fire, we can't burn it anymore, unfortunately. But yeah, so we use that as the fuel source, and we smoulder it and blow that smoke under the peat, and it takes on this beautiful, beautiful aroma. So you can have a smell of that and then have a taste as well.
Oh yeah.
Wow, isn't it?
And how long's the process?
So there's not a definitive time. It's sort of when it's ready, but it basically what we do is we last peating campaign, we probably did it for about 8 weeks, and it was going 24/7. So through the night, as soon as one's batch done, shovel it out and get another batch in. It was
That's like
real
bold and flavorful,
bold.
right?
So yeah, so that we had that measured over in Scotland to see how much peat was in there, and that's at 54 parts per million. Even like a Lafroig, which is quite a peaty monster, their barley's at 48 parts per million. We got 54, and that was on our first try.
Right.
So one cool thing that we're doing is we're going to do a thing called a peat project. So we've always historically getting it from Washington State, because that's somewhere that has an abundance of it, but we've recently got some from Penticton.
Okay.
We're also looking to get some from Souk as well, and then we're also thinking of adding in seaweed into that peat to get that lovely saltiness. So a seaweed peated malt would be just fantastic.
That's going to be hopefully a good combination.
Yes, well we've done it. We've done a small batch of it.
Seaweed from the island.
Seaweed from the island, yeah. So it came about because we did an IPA, and it was a kelp IPA. So we brewed it with sugar kelp.
Right.
And so we had all this seaweed, and we thought, let's smoke some, see what it's like. So we smoked some, and it smelled amazing. So we've done a small batch, but we're going to try and do some more and more. So we'll.
And I noticed the color, like there's not too much of a difference. That's just like a shade.
It's a shade
browner,
darker,
but you don't really tell.
Not a lot, no. Not a lot at all. Obviously, these are our roasted malts, which we use for our porters and the stouts, but we don't use these in the whiskies at all.
Can I have a smell of that?
Yeah, you have a taste as well. It has a lot more bitterness to it.
And what is this added for? Which?
So this would be in your porters, your stouts, stuff like that.
Okay.
So this is actually a roasted wheat, and that's again for your much darker, your more creamier beers.
We have come to the end of this week's whiskey video. This week's video was the first of a two-part series showcasing the Macaloneys Distillery itself. Stay tuned next week as Lee continues the second part of the tour, showing us the copper pot stills, a very unique feature in any whiskey distillery, along with their casks, as well as a lineup of the entire Macaloneys Distillery whiskeys. But more importantly, they're going to be showcasing the Peated Dirac Brac, an award-winning whiskey. Until then, wishing everyone a happy Halloween. Sláinte.